Hi, I'm Dr. David Allen, and I want to thank everybody here for coming. And these people are really geniuses that organize this, and they're great activists, and that's what we need more of. We need people to get involved in this. I'm going to try to give you a big picture of a lot of science. You know, this subject, cannabis, is a really big science. It involves political stuff. It involves health and building materials and clothing, and it involves just all kinds of crazy science about protein replication and enzyme systems, and so no one really knows all the science of this. So you've been kind of beat up with a bunch of science already today. I'm going to try to make this kind of a happy talk and give you the big picture of what I see, what's going on. I'm a retired heart surgeon. I used to do coronary bypasses and valve replacements. I operated on anything in the chest, lung operations, aortic operations. I did vascular surgery, and so I have a lot of experience in pathophysiology. I would take people to surgery and open their chest and put them on bypass, take vein out of their leg and bypass their coronary arteries. And I did this under emergency conditions and had a 1.4% operative mortality. So I know a lot of surgery and anatomy and physiology. And I've been using cannabis since I was 17 years old, all through college and medical school and residencies. I did 5 years of general surgery residency and passed general surgery boards. And I did 3 years of cardiovascular surgery residency with 1 year of pediatric cardiovascular surgery with a famous surgeon, Dr. Eduardo Arcenegas. So I know a lot of surgical procedures. I became interested in cannabis in my medical career when the patent cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectants came out. It's patent number 6,630,507. And in that patent, it proves that it stops reperfusion injury. And as a heart surgeon, my job was to protect the heart from reperfusion injury. And what that is when you operate on the heart, you clamp the aorta and you operate on a still heart, and it's anoxic. But what really hurts is when you open the clamp, the blood shoots into the heart, and the oxygen dissociates into oxygen-free radicals, and it causes massive calcium release. And that's what kills the heart. And so my job was to protect the heart from all of that. And so I knew about this patent, and the implications, you could read the patent, it's really kind of hard to read, and people don't really understand the implications of that patent. And it's going to really change our life in many ways because cannabis is a massive antioxidant, and it stops a lot of diseases. And the reason is because it's the master control system for all physiology. And so you can kind of think of it in the aspect of the radio doesn't work in the car unless the ignition switch is turned. So the endocannabinoid signaling system is kind of like the ignition switch of the car for metabolism. And the reason is because you have to control what fuels you burn, whether you're burning sugar or whether you're burning fat. So those are the two major fuels that the body burns. If you burn sugar, you produce a lot of oxygen-free radicals, which is the exhaust from burning that fuel. And when you burn fat, you produce less oxygen-free radicals over time. So sugar burning is inflammatory and fat burning is anti-inflammatory. And so this system of the ECS regulates what's called homeostasis. And it's kind of hard concept to understand, but everything goes up and down. So your respirations go up and down, your blood pressure goes up and down, your sugar, your pH, everything that you can measure goes. Life is in the mid-ground between the two extremes. Some people travel up here, some people travel down there, and some people travel like this. And this is all a result of how well these enzyme systems work. So if your enzyme systems work really well, then you got a nice balance. If they don't work so well, you may be traveling down low. And so the cannabis is like a super vitamin. It's a nutraceutical, it's a nutritional substance that helps your body but doesn't hurt you. And it's a dietary or metabolic essential. So our diets have been deprived of these cannabinoids, and they should be in all human diets and animal diets as well. So some people are cannabinoid deficient, some people are cannabinoid endowed. So, all right. So, and actually this homeostasis system, I would like to kind of rename it so people could understand what it really is, because homeostasis is a kind of crazy word. I'd like to refer to this system as the avoidance of death system. It brings home to what it really is. It's how to avoid death. And so if you're in homeostasis, you're avoiding death. And if you're not in homeostasis, you're riding close to death. Okay, and it's just that simple. Now, I wrote an article about amygdala control, or the art of Zen, and it's about brain anatomy and the cannabinoid system. And the brain is complex. The upper part is the cerebrum, or the mammalian part of the brain, and it's responsible for thinking and comparing different things and coming up with a logical conclusion. It takes time to do that. It's a property of mammals. The hindbrain, brainstem, is the reptilian part of the brain, and it's responsible for preservation of the species, and it does all the F's: fight, flight, freeze, forage. And it doesn't take any time for it to react. It reacts immediately. Once the brainstem is stimulated, it reacts immediately. And the midbrain is the switch between the upper and the lower. Part of the midbrain is called the amygdala. So the amygdala is the fear-sensing organ of the brain. It's kind of useless now, and is probably the cause of PTSD. And what it does is, if it senses fear, if there's fear of anything that's happened in the past, it puts you on high alert. So, and it's especially with auditory and smell that triggers the amygdala, or this PTSD kind of thing. And so whenever you stimulate the amygdala, what it does is it squeezes the adrenal glands and shoots out adrenaline, epinephrine, and gives you a little epinephrine rush. And it makes you on high alert, and you're worried about something nasty going to happen, and you're ready to move if you have to, or fight. And so, and what it does is it causes a concept called amygdala hijack. And amygdala hijack is when the bear is charging you, you can't look at his eye, the color of his eyes, you got to get out of the way. So if you actually start thinking about something when you're in danger, your survival rate's going to be lower. So amygdala hijack actually stops you thinking. It's crazy, but it really has. Now this has a major impact on learning, because when you're in amygdala hijack, if somebody tries to tell you information, you view that information as being annoying, as really irritating. Why are you telling me this crazy information when the bear is trying to attack me? And so the concept is like, if you tell your wife that you don't have the money for the rent, after that, she don't want to hear anything you got to say because she's already in amygdala hijack. So it has a major impact on learning. Now, the cannabinoids work by inhibiting nervous conduction, and they inhibit by retrograde inhibition of neuronal transmission. And what that means is if the brain is having a seizure and it's telling the arm to shake, well, the cannabinoid system has a way of saying, well, wait a minute, you're giving me too much information. We don't need all that information. And it has a way to slowing that nerve transmission. And that's kind of the mechanism that cannabis works by inhibiting seizures and stuff. So when you use cannabis, everybody has cannabinoid receptors, but once you use it, you have a bunch more receptors than you did before. And these receptors are kind of like little chemical antennae. And I'll go into that a little bit later. But so when you use cannabis, you upregulate the number of cannabinoid receptors you have, and all of a sudden you have more ability to inhibit parts of your brain that you could previously not inhibit. So that means when you use cannabis, you have more ability to inhibit the amygdala. And the amygdala is the evil organ of the brain. So people, when you inhibit the amygdala, that means you can remain more in cognitive thought, less in brainstem mode. And it also means that you can have more ability to have empathy. So Dr. Bob Melamede talks about backwards-looking people and forward-looking people, blips and flips. The backwards-looking people are fearful. They're always they don't like change. They hoard money and weapons and food, and they're in a fear state. And he believes that most of these kind of people go into police jobs and government jobs. And the forward-looking people are accepting of change. They welcome change in a way, and they don't have these fears. And I think one of the reasons for that is because they tried to do a test on what cannabinoid receptors did on memory. And what they did was they know right where on the DNA is a real long thing, and they know right where on the DNA that the coding is for CB1 receptors. And they can knock that out and put gibberish DNA in there. And when they raise mice with this new DNA that doesn't have cannabinoid receptors, they can test the mice and see if they do have cannabinoid receptors, and indeed they do not. And so what they wanted to do is they wanted to test what's the difference in memory between knockout mice without cannabinoid receptors and regular mice with cannabinoid receptors. So they invented this thing called a Morris water maze. And what they did was they have this big vat of water, and they have a TV camera over it, and they have some markers on the side, a square, a star, a moon, and something else. And they would flood the stage, and then they would put a little block of something underneath there, just underneath the surface of the water, and you couldn't see it. It's a little stage underneath the water. And they would throw the mice in there. So they throw the regular mice in there, they swim around, they eventually bump into the stage where it's at, and they stand up on it and they save themselves. The cannabinoid mice, the cannabinoid deficient mice, the knockout mice, they do the same thing, throw it in there, they swim around, they find it. So after a week or so of doing this, the mice know where the stage is. And they throw them in, they swim directly to the stage, both sets. So what they do is they repeat this experiment, and they just move the stage to a different location. And what happened is the regular mice, they swim around, they go right where it used to be, They test the water. They see, well, wait a minute, it's not here. We got to do something different. And they swim around until they find it, and they save themselves. The cannabinoid deficient mice continually swim where it used to be until they drown. And more interesting, if you pick them up and put them on the stage in a new location, they jump off and continue swimming where it used to be. So let's take that concept and apply it to humans. So some humans are cannabinoid endowed, and some humans are cannabinoid deficient, okay? So the cannabinoid deficient mice do repetitive destructive behavior despite the fact that all the information that they're gathering is telling them that what they're doing is not working. That describes the drug war. And so they hate change. So humans that are cannabinoid deficient are backwards looking people. They don't like change. They get stuck in memories and can't let go of the past. And they don't like other nationalities. They don't like anything different from them. So this really has a great impact on learning and knowledge. So now I'm kind of famous for saying that the discovery of the endocannabinoid signaling system is the single most important discovery in human history and will save more lives than the discovery and application of sterile surgical technique. And what that means is more people will be saved by manipulating the ECS than are currently saved by sterile surgical procedures. And this is because cannabis is a nutraceutical that should be in your diet, and it's a metabolic necessity for people. Now, let's talk about law a little bit. In the United States, in California, they've semi-legalized marijuana. And what that means is if you get caught with cannabis, unless if it's over an ounce or so, they just write you a ticket and send you on your way. But what's really happening is so the drug task force are no longer able to thrive in this because delegalization, semi-legalization era. So I predict that the drug task force will diminish after cannabis is completely legal. And what's happening is the code enforcement people will fly drones and stuff over your property. They'll make charges, and you have to go to a courthouse, which is held in a code enforcement building. They hire a lawyer who always as the hearing officer, and he always sides on their side. The code enforcement officers come testify against you. You're there without a lawyer, so there's no warrant, there's no defense lawyer, and there's no jury. And this is the reason why this is happening is because jury nullification is such a powerful tool in the United States that they're having a hard time finding 12 people to say guilty, because there's always one joker that knows that you shouldn't be charged and punished for smoking a flower. And so they're having a hard time getting 12 people say guilty. And so the drug war's business plan is morphing because they need that 12 peoples to say guilty before the drug war works. So they changed their business plan by removing the juror from the equation and sending you to code enforcement. And I've been to several of these code enforcement hearings. I do a lot of court support. I testify as expert witness in any cannabis cases, and I'll be glad to testify in any case for free If you need to get a hold of me, my email is cali215doc@gmail. It's California215doc@gmail. I'd be glad to help anybody with any cannabis questions or legal issues. I can testify by Skype or FaceTime as well. So. Sure.
Yeah.
My email is cali215doc@gmail.com.
And if you miss that, we will have it at the Hemp Embassy as well. Thank you very much, Dave.
Right.
That's awesome. Thank you. Are you going to stick around for a question or two? No? Dave, we have a question or two for you, so please take a seat.
I'd like to know whether or not cannabis impairs driving or it actually enhances driving.
Oh, I'm glad you asked.
And also, does it affect your short-term memory?
All right. There's so much propaganda in this thing. There's a study what was done by the National Institute of Health, NIH. So it's a government agency, and it's called Sexual Differences in Driving Performance Under the Influence of Marijuana. You could look it up. And the conclusions don't really match what the tables show. And so if you have to actually look at the tables to really understand what they're saying. It's a government study, so they really try to hide the truth the best they can. But if you know how to read these things, you can find out what they're not really saying. And what they did was they had a driving simulator, and they had men and women, and they would come in and they would put like animals and stuff in front of them while they're driving, and they'd have to avoid crashes and stuff. And they would measure their reaction time and number of crashes and some other data. And they did it on men and women, and they did it again with the same person smoking cannabis. So this is a before and after study, and it showed, if you look at the table 2, it says that women had no difference in either reaction time or number crash avoidance or anything. It was the same, which tells a lot in itself. But men had 1.1 second faster reaction time. Now, it wasn't a glowing thing about this study. It didn't say, oh, well, it shows that there's no impairment. Because both men and women, it didn't show any impairment. But my take from it was, under some conditions, that driving under the influence of cannabis may be actually safer. Now, it's going to take a long time before we really know the final answer, but I know a lot of people that use cannabis already know the answer to this. And a large portion of the people driving down the street every day are smoking in their car, well, at least in California. And if there was a major cause of accidents, then we would have a massive increase in accidents, and that's not happening. People are more alert, they're less anxious, and they kind of drive slower and just enjoy the drive rather than being, the amygdala is an evil organ, and it causes anxiety, and it's really the bane of humanity.
I was just about to say too that I believe with statistics to do with crashes in Australia, it's mainly speed as in driving fast.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting to know that maybe cannabis slows you down a bit.
Right.
Any other questions?
I'm just wondering if you could highlight the differences between ingesting cannabis and smoking.
Okay, well, the main reason is, the main difference is once you eat something, it's done. You can't stop it. And so smoking, you can titrate. You go, oh, I've had enough, and put it down. Eating, once you're done, put it in, and it's gone. The second thing is your liver metabolizes cannabis on first pass to from delta 9 to delta 11 hydroxy THC, and that actually potentiates the effect. So when you eat it, it actually increases the effect a little bit by changing it to delta 11. And here's something I found that's really interesting. I think eating cannabis can be a diagnosis of a cannabinoid deficiency syndrome. So most people that use cannabis on a regular basis, if you give them a cookie, they'll have a mild effect, but most of them won't be put out. But I've seen many cases of people that have never eaten cannabis, so they're cannabinoid deficient. They eat a little brownie that wouldn't really affect me or you, maybe, and they would have a massive effect, lay down, oh, I'm dying, that kind of stuff, and then they get a fear of eating it after that too. So I believe that if you take an oral dose of cannabis, and you have a wild effect, that is the diagnosis of a hypo-functioning ECS, a cannabinoid deficiency.
Two very little questions that I haven't understood. One is, does hemp seed oil contain this vital CBD?
Yes. The hemp plant may actually be better medicine than the marijuana plant in some aspects. And there is CBD in hemp oil. I don't know I guess different ones have different concentrations, but really you need both THC and CBD. You need whole plant medicine for most diseases. And most diseases can be cured a lot of diseases are going to be cured by stimulating CB2 receptors, which are anti-inflammatory, and putting people on ketogenic diets. So what happens is sugar inhibits neurogenesis and stem cell differentiation. So everybody has stem cells everywhere. So when the fetus is, or let's say, when you have an egg and the animal is developing in the shell, okay, it feeds off the fat. It's not exposed to sugar. And so all these cells that are differentiating into muscle cells, cartilage cells, nerve cells, everything else, they're in an environment of ketosis. And they're not exposed to a lot of sugar. And so sugar in our diet actually inhibits stem cell production. And there's been some proof that heart attacks and liver damage can be reduced dramatically by stimulating CB2 receptors and putting people on ketogenic diets.
So just to get back to that first question, the just hemp seed oil is insufficient. It doesn't do the full job.
Well, the medicine is not on the inside of the leaf. It's not really in the seed. The medicine is on the outside of the leaf. The contaminants are on the inside of the leaf. So really, when you make hash, when we concentrate the resin glands, that's where all the medicine is. But the medicine is so powerful that even just a little bit of it will help you. So you can get medicine off the stems. You can get medicine off the fan leaves. There's people that get benefits from using the roots. So none of the plant all of the plant is useful. And I'd like to also mention that the most valuable part of the plant is not the bud. It's not the fan leaves. It's not the stems. It's not the roots. The most valuable part of the plant is the genetics, the seed. So the seed of a plant is really the fruit of any plant, okay? And so the fruit of any plant is always like 40 to 60% of the weight of that plant. You can think of any fruit you can think of. And so if you grow a plant without seed, it's going to weigh 40 to 60% less than it would with seed. So the seed is the genetics, and currently they're selling for $10 a piece. A gram of seeds is about 50 seeds. So 50 seeds times $10. It's pretty expensive. Not too many things cost $500 a gram. So the seed is the most valuable. Plant seed everywhere, overgrow the government.
But hemp seeds are not that expensive, like if you buy them in a plastic bag. Are they here?
What's the question?
I've seen hemp seeds in a plastic bag that's been bought, and it hasn't been that expensive here.
Some of that is denatured, and you know, that they won't grow. A lot of that, they have hemp seed and bird seed. And some birds will not sing unless there's hemp seed in their bird feed.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to wrap that up now. That lady wants to talk to you more, obviously, Dave. I think part of it is just working out, because, for instance, at long last, Australia has allowed basically hemp seed for food. Right. So
Awesome.
we've got now an industrial hemp industry where we can be consuming indeed hemp seed and flour and oil and so on. So there's now a lot of interest in seeing how that is different to, for instance, medical cannabis strains or other strains of cannabis.
Well, the government's being forced to acknowledge that they were wrong all this time, that cannabis should be in your food, and it's going to progress from here. We're in the infancy of this science. And if you really want to make money in the world, what you want to do is study about the ECS and cannabis products. They're going to have so many applications. Cannabis is a new classification of antibiotic. And what that means is all different antibiotics are classified by their mechanism of action. So penicillin stops RNA polymerase, and tetracycline does something different, and all these chloramphenicol, all these different antibiotics, they're classified by the mechanism of action of how they kill the bacteria. Cannabis kills bacteria from an unknown mechanism, which means it's an antibiotic, it's a new class of antibiotic, that no other antibiotic does this. So we're going to find cannabis products applied to all kinds of things that we want antibacterial protection from. And building materials and clothes. We're in an exciting time of our lives, and so study about the cannabis plant.
Right, thank you so much, Dave. Woo!